All right, hello. I'm here with Robert Likarish, founder and distiller at Ironroot Republic Distilling.
Thanks for coming up and visiting today.
Thanks for having me. I've got to say, Dennis is a haul.
It's a drive up here from Austin, that's for sure.
It is, but happy to be here. See, we got stills behind us. When you first walk in, you get all those glorious smells of what a distillery is like, the corn and the fermentation.
And whiskey and CO2, all the fun stuff.
Yes, exactly. But beyond that, y'all do, what you're seeing here is producing world-class whiskey. And your awards have improved that. And so I figured today, learn a little bit about what Ironroot is and where the name comes from and, you know, how that influenced the way y'all are distilling through the élevage process and things like that. So Ironroot, there's grapes involved, cognac. I mean, what's the story?
So Ironroot is actually an homage to the history of Denison, the city that we're in. So it's a little known history, but the short matter is that a gentleman who lived here back in the late 1800s named T.V. Munson is credited for saving the French wine and brandy industry. Okay. And so what happened was that back in the late 1800s, there's this, we have diseases all over the planet. Specifically, this one's a grape disease that was here in the United States. With the advent of the steam engine and faster travel between Europe and America, that disease that lives basically in little tiny weevils called phylloxera transferred from the United States over to Europe. And essentially, it was like smallpox hitting European grapes. It wiped out over 80% of the French grapes, had gotten into Germany and Spain and Italy, and was just decimating European wine production. Obviously, the French are big fans of their wine, so they freaked out a little bit. So they sent their scientists all over the world to try to figure out a solution to this issue. The only areas of France that were safe were really areas with really sandy soils because the weevils couldn't really crawl through sandy soils. But Bordeaux and Cognac, those areas were hit hard.
Okay.
So there was a kind of a crazy guy here in Denison, Texas, who had decided that he loved wine and wanted to grow world-class grapes here in the United States. But after a few years after planting them, they would die off because of all these diseases we have here. So he found this Texas grapefruit that was highly resistant to not only drought, but also to phylloxera because it has really thick roots and the weevil couldn't dig into the roots of the grapes. And so he was able to start grafting those European grapes on top of this Texas grapefruit. Once he had started doing that, saw the success, the French were able to come to him through connections to the Smithsonian of all places. Like, hey, there's this dude out in Texas doing some things with grapes. We don't know if it'll be helpful, but
give it a shot.
Go check it out. And it turned out that was the solution. So now a large portion of French grapes are actually grown on this American and Texas grapefruit stock that comes from here in Texas.
Hence iron.
And so it's the iron grapefruits of Texas that saved the French wine and specifically the Cognac region. So Cognac, so because of this connection, because they were able to start regrowing their grapes, they decided to become sister cities with Denison, Texas. So
I gotcha.
Every couple of years, they send, we get master distillers or the mayor from Cognac will come over and visit us here in Texas. And so we've developed this really beautiful relationship with them.
And so for those that aren't familiar with cognac, what is cognac?
So cognac is a type of brandy, brandy is spirit distilled from fruit rather than whiskey, which is distilled from grain.
Got it.
So obviously in France, they have a lot of grapes. So both cognac and Armagnac are going to be distilled from grapes. You have a really famous variety of brandy also called Calvados, which is grown in northern France, which is apple, and generally a little bit of pear.
Okay.
But so the French, they grow a lot of fruits.
So it's basically a fruit-based spirit.
Distillate, fruit-based spirit. And so
and they age it though in barrels as well.
Yeah, it's
correct?
going to be aged in barrels for years and decades. When we were over in France in November, Marcia and I had the pleasure of tasting cognacs that were over 100 years old.
Wow.
Which is crazy to think about. Stuff
was it good?
it was fantastic. Yeah, it was. They had been in barrel for 80 years and had taken out and were aging it in glass now. But it was distilled in 1895.
That's insane.
Yeah, and it still exists.
Super cool.
Still exists.
Okay, so y'all go over there and they come over here. Mm-hmm. Y'all have adopted, and y'all are one of the few in Texas that have adopted the élevage process of aging whiskey in the barrel, correct?
Correct. So early on, one of the distillery guess, distiller masters here in the U.S., Hubert Germain Robin. His philosophy has really had a huge impact on us. And so we started learning from him, took a number of classes from him, and then brought on Nancy Fraley, which, if you guys know Still Austin, she does work with them as well.
Yes, she does.
And so that's where a lot of these brandy techniques have really been integrated into what we're doing. So we don't just do slow reduction, which you'll see a lot when people talk about élevage, it's slow reduction, but we actually are independently, before we're even considering spirit going into blends, is tasting through barrels every 3 to 4 months and making adjustment in barrels, whether that's proof, whether that's the barrel that it's in. So for non-bourbons, we can actually move whiskey or brandy from newer barrels into older and older casks to reduce the impact of oak on the whiskey, especially here in Texas. These crazy heat, you have to handle that a little bit differently than you would in Kentucky.
I mean, that's a huge undertaking to be able to go through that as often as you do and as much whiskey as you're producing.
It's not an easy task. Again, the volunteers for Monday mornings when we're tasting through all the barrels, though, that's a very long list.
I was going to say, that's not hard to get volunteers?
Not here at our end. So what we do have our tasting panel that we'll bring together every 3 to 4 months. It'll take us about a week to go through all the barrels. But so we have that part of the process. You also have, for us, we've actually moved into larger barrels. So we're not using just 53-gallon barrels now.
Wow.
The majority of our barrels are actually 63 gallons. And again, that's part of that process of we're looking at how do we slow things down, which is kind of the French thing that kind of got beat into us was 2 things. One, terroir, flavor of the land. That's why we use the heirloom grains. It's why most of our grains grown within 60 miles. 95% of what we use is grown locally. And then also slowing things down.
Slowing aging in Texas. You are fighting an uphill battle, my friend.
It is an uphill battle, but it's one of those things that's over 5 years learning how things age, specifically here in this region, and how do you handle that and what's the best way to do it. So one, we're doing for non-bourbons using used barrels and approaching it a little bit that way. But we also have, for bourbons, we actually are going to larger barrels. So 63 gallons. So they're 20% larger than a normal barrel.
Which will help slow it down.
Slow down extraction. We're going to slow down the angel share. And so from us, the hope is that you're going to see 6, 7, 8, maybe 10-year-old whiskeys coming out from Ironroot in the future.
So what's the average age right now?
Average age of our whiskeys right now is about 3.5 years old. Again,
pretty standard in Texas.
Yeah, it's pretty standard for Texas. Again, we're only 5 years old. We're almost 5 years old, so we're not quite 5. We do have barrels that are 5 that will be 5 in August, and will be continue getting older.
Awesome.
So you will, again, this fall you'll start seeing a few 5-year releases from us.
Okay.
And then after that, you'll start seeing some 6, 7,
okay.
Some fun stuff.
Well, those are some exciting things coming, and I know. So let's talk about the whiskeys that you have out now, because you have a handful out.
We do.
So the flagship, which is mostly found or that you find most readily available in Texas, is the Promethean, correct?
Yes.
All right. So what is the Promethean?
Promethean is going to be, so we have 2 different profiles for bourbon. We have the Harbinger line and the Promethean.
Okay.
Promethean is going to be a little bit higher rye content and also focus more on the flint corn that we're using. So a lot more leather, dark chocolate. It's going to have a little bit more spice to it.
Cool.
Compared to what we consider to be darker flavor profile.
Okay. And then you mentioned the other bourbon line, Harbinger.
Yeah, Harbinger is going to be a fruitier, sweeter. I get a lot more like dates. There's a little bit more European oak that's going to be used in that particular line.
Which both of these bourbons have won awards, multiple of them.
Correct.
But the Harbinger took home the gold buckle from the Texas Whiskey Festival for best graded glass bourbon in Texas.
That's right.
The Promethean took home silver in 2018.
It did.
So not only do they have worldwide winning bourbons, they have Texas award-winning bourbons. So for whatever that's worth to people. Okay, so then those are your 2 bourbons. And then you have some things that you have a corn whiskey, which if you're not familiar with, you come down here, try it. But it literally won the world's best corn whiskey award. So literally you can get the world's best corn whiskey here in Denison, Texas.
That's right.
And it is the Hubris.
Hubris, yes.
So what is
That's our purple corn mash bill aged exclusively in European oak. And it's, again, it's one of the older whiskeys that we do. Again, it's corn whiskey, so it's going to be in used barrels rather than brand new barrels. But it's very deep, very rich, very viscous whiskey.
Oh, yeah.
Especially at 117.8 proof. It's not going to burn you like you would expect with
It
a
does
high
not.
proof, but it's going to have the viscosity and intensity of flavor.
I wouldn't have guessed that just a little bit ago, that it was 117 proof. So you said it's one of the oldest. How old is it?
So this year, so the 2019, which was released in January, would have been the youngest barrel was 29 months. The oldest, it was 3 barrels, so it's 29 month, 39 month, and then a 46 month blend.
So then that's the corn whiskey, and then you have 2 other lines that are out now.
Right. So you've got Icarus, which is going to be a little bit more limited than even Hubris. It basically was here at the distillery and then just North Texas, but it was Hubris that we took and we aged further in both port casks and peated malt barrels.
So it is a corn whiskey that is cask finished in port and peat.
Right.
Now, are you doing them separately, or are you splitting it up and then marrying it back together?
So yeah, they're split up and then married back together. So again,
which is what I'm drinking right now.
Oh yeah, the joke with this one was that corn whiskey is kind of the redheaded stepchild of the whiskey world.
Yes.
We've got a lot of gingers making whiskey up here, so we take a lot of pride in that. So we're like, well, what would happen if we took this least respected whiskey and we treated it like a high-end scotch? And so that's where the wine finishing and the peat came into effect to age it and really put it a different twist on corn whiskey.
It comes together nicely.
It's fantastic, isn't it?
It is. It's and if I'm not mistaken, y'all had some at the festival last year, which was the first time I got to try it.
Yeah, that was the bottle that lasted the least amount of time. Yeah. That one was gone very quickly.
Well, you put a corn-based, basically a corn whiskey. You put anything aged in peat in front of a crowd like that, it's gonna
fly.
It's gonna fly pretty quickly. All right, and then so you have one more that it's only available here, correct, at the distillery?
You're talking about Esoteric?
Yes.
Esoteric will be available again. We're actually out of it currently. So it will be available again at the end of the year. Be one of our 5th anniversary releases.
Okay.
So Esoteric is where we put all of our experimental. We do at least 3 to 4 experimental whiskeys a year.
Okay.
And then those will get blended into Esoteric. But kind of the cool thing about Esoteric is we'll put a blend together. Half of it will then get put back in barrel. The other half gets bottled. And then we'll age up, and then we'll blend in the new whiskeys.
Okay.
Half of it gets barreled. The other half goes back in barrel.
Esoteric is kind of like an ongoing experiment of whatever y'all kind of do.
It's a bastardized Solera method. Is what we call it. So it's Spanish-style aging with a lot of their like ports and sherries and wine.
Speaking of experimentals, do you have anything that you can share that's coming up?
Ooh, shoot. Well,
and if the answer is no, then that's fine.
Well, there's a few things coming up.
Okay.
So in the not too distant future, we will be turning 5 years old. We'll be throwing a big party in November. That will be doing a 5th anniversary release. We'll first have a special release of Esoteric, but we'll also be releasing 5-year-old bourbon that we've been curating for a long time. So we're really excited about that. If you want something that's high proof and just intense, then it's going to be every bit of everything that we've got. So it's going to be fantastic. There'll be about 200 bottles of that. So
everything we've come to expect from an Ironroot whiskey, but 5 years old.
Yeah, turn it up to 11.
Okay, turn it up to 11, up one step notch. Okay, all right. Well, that is fantastic. So I know that then you and I are trying to figure out a project here coming up soon that if it works out, we'll share more on that. But we're also part of the historic and first ever Whiskey Festival blend that worked with Crowded Barrel, Balcones, and Andalusia on, which I got to say was fantastic. And I appreciate y'all doing that because it was a fun time. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate you sharing a little bit about your whiskey. And obviously, you can find more information about them online, social media. Sign up for their monthly newsletter. And you'll get to learn out about all the corn that they're experimenting with and some of these other upcoming projects. But until then, cheers.
Cheers.